Thank you for joining us for a Wednesday morning edition of Sree's special election coverage featuring the latest news, analysis, and special guests. It's 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time. This morning, after the election, we will do our best to make sense of yesterday's election results. Sree Srinivasan is our host. Mary C. Curtis is our political analyst. Shawna Vercher, the political fixer, is our guest. This is part of a series of shows Digimentors is producing in partnership with Scroll and Scroll Global, one of India's most important independent websites. Cliff Albright from Black Voters Matter was our first guest. Then we had Brandon Jones from the SPLC Action Fund. Mitra Kalita was our guest for our noon Eastern Time show yesterday. Randall Yip joined us at 9 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday evening. We also produced a show for the Indian Express featuring Dr. Lee Marengoff, director of the Marist poll. These shows are produced by Digimentors, the social digital events AI consulting firm Sree started with his friend Andrew Lee. Again, Shawna Vercher, the political fixer, is our guest. You can follow her on Twitter at Shawna Vercher. Jonah Batambuze is our special guest today. He's founder of the Blindian Project. We'll hear more about that later. You can follow him at Blindian Project on Twitter. Mary C. Curtis is our political analyst. She's a CQ roll call columnist and Equal Time podcast host. She will be joining us in just a little bit. She's currently doing an interview with the BBC. Sree Srinivasan is our host. He's, of course, a New York City-based journalist and CEO co-founder of Digimentors. I'll turn it over to Sree Srinivasan.
Good morning, hello, good evening, wherever you are in the world, welcome. This is Sree Srinivasan in New York, and it is my pleasure to be with all of you as we try to figure out the day after, the morning after, the most important election that I have seen in my lifetime. We say elections have consequences. We're about to experience those consequences. We're going to try and explain what happened and where we go from here. I have put on my brightest shirt and put on what I've been told is my old man cologne, even though this is television, because there is work to do. There's so much for us to see, hear, experience, and understand. This election will have repercussions for generations to come. This is also a moment for us to understand why things happened and how things happened and where we go. We have a fantastic show for you with great guests who are super busy, but still making the time to help explain what we have seen around us. We are going to use the next hour to take your questions, your comments, wherever you're watching from in the world. Please talk to us. We can bring your comments on the screen as we're doing right here with our friend Jonathan, who's watching from New York. Greetings and thank you for watching every episode, Jonathan. We're so grateful to you. I am also looking through my Facebook, my tweets. I'm getting text messages from all kinds of people, and all of it matters. And I'm trying to absorb it all so that we can bring you the best understanding of what's going on. Very little shouting on this show compared to what you will see on TV. We'll also keep an eye on television and see how the coverage is going. You can see that Donald Trump has in fact been elected president of the United States. The Senate is with the Republicans. We're still waiting to see what happens with the House. So with that, I'd like to bring on stage our friend Shawna Vercher, the political fixer. She's going to help us understand what's happening. She has worked very hard for the last few months to explain what's at stake, and she is now here with us. Please follow her at Shawna Vercher, and we're so glad that we are able to be on her platforms live with you. Welcome, Shawna.
Thank you so much for having me, Sree, and thank you for having these important platforms so that people do have a forum to get some really good information and sort through all of this in a healthy way. I really appreciate it.
Healthy is really important because we're seeing people who are so upset, Shawna. But tell me about how you're feeling this morning, and then put your political fixer hat on so that people can understand what happened.
Okay, well, I am a fixer, so sometimes that does mean trying to help things before they break, which was something that we've been working hard on these last several months. But sometimes, a lot of times too often, I'm also a crisis manager. So right now, I think for me, I've had to personally shift into crisis management mode. But at the same time, to be honest, it feels like a death. I think we're all going to have, well, not all of us, I guess about 50%, 50% of us are going to have a grieving process to go through that is real and sincere. I think we're going to talk about this analytically, but I would just also try to give yourself some space and some grace today, because this is going to feel like grief for so many folks.
And you, of course, have been working on so many aspects of this story, of this issue, of this monumental election. What are the things that you were doing, and what are you thinking about going forward before we bring our friend Jonah on as well?
That's a great question. So we were contacted by TikTok and asked to create some content for the platform that was more longer form. And right as we started creating that content at Political Fixer on TikTok, then the nomination of Kamala Harris, her intention to seek the nomination for president, was announced shortly thereafter. So it was really great timing to build an online community where we could try to express what was happening, really slow it down and explain it to folks. And also, to be candid, we were very quick on the mute and block buttons to create a safe online community, which a lot of people are looking for a lot of different reasons. And so it grew extremely rapidly. Our reach last month on just TikTok alone was over 10 million. And we really felt like we tapped into a vein of people wanting to participate and not wanting it to be nasty and emotionally manipulative and fear baiting, which sometimes some of the news channels can be. So the answer to your second half of the question is that work now unfortunately becomes even more important. We plan on doing our best to try to be a calming voice in all of this, though the tone is going to shift, because prior to this, it was about hopefulness and, let's come together, let's rebuild. And now we are about to shift back into a mode of resistance, which is hard to say out loud, I'll be honest. And so it's going to be a lot tougher, a lot less jubilant, unfortunately, based on what we're expecting, based on what we're already seeing.
Thank you. We really appreciate you. Everyone, please check out the Political Fixer on TikTok. 10 million views, 10 million young people and older people who are on TikTok got to understand what was happening because of Shawna, and she's here with us. Thank you. And I know it's a very busy morning. Now let's bring on our special guest from London. Jonah is with us. He is the founder of the Blindian Project, which brings Black and Brown communities together. And he's been paying extra attention to this election. He's an American based in London, outside of London. Please follow at Blindian Project and check out blindian-project.com. Please welcome Jonah.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, Sree. Such an important conversation. I'm feeling a bit deflated this morning, but at the same point in time, as a founder and kind of head of communities that represent communities that will be severely affected by what has happened, feel it's important to come on the platform and give a few words.
Thank you. One of the things that you've been doing is following very closely what's happening with this election. What is the mood in the UK right now? What are you seeing on morning television and in the press?
Sure. It's always interesting when you're a bit removed from the place. And I'm talking about other people who are born over here or live over here. And I'm seeing a lot of comments that are saying, what have you done? What were you thinking? What are you thinking? A lot of people just really, really in disbelief. I think I've told you about this, Sree. I remember when Donald Trump was active on Twitter, and I just remember every morning, even though I lived abroad, seeing these incredulous tweets and not knowing what to really make of them. And obviously, they took a mental impact on me. And the tweets are back now. So as Shawna was saying, it's just kind of getting mentally prepared for what is to come, and thinking about how we support our communities, and really try to bring people together. We'll talk about this later on, but I think when you look at the stats and how voting happened across the different demographics by race, you see people really haven't put things together about how this intersectionally, affects many communities of color.
And trying to understand where this all goes. Dan says, looking forward to sorting it all out this morning to move forward. And we can bring your comments in. He's watching on LinkedIn, and Kathy is watching on Facebook. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, as well as on the Scroll front page. Scroll is one of India's most important independent news sites. Scroll Global has a global audience as well. And Jonah, when you are, as you said, a little removed, it's different, right? So it hits kind of different. But to me, it feels like what happened with the UK. The British had two opportunities to reject Brexit, and they willingly did it twice. There's been some buyer's remorse, but that's how democracy works. Can you reflect on that a little bit? Because I remember in 2016, it was that Brexit vote that was an early indicator of how America might vote as well.
Correct. I was thinking about that as well today too. When you think about conservative and labor, and how Sunak was in position for a couple of years' time, and similar to what happened in the States, we saw almost a landslide victory that not only saw him removed, but many of the MPs as well too, and Parliament. So very similar to what it looks like happened in the States.
Shawna, your thoughts on that particular angle?
Yeah, as far as reaction, I think, again, talking about the stages of grief, there's a lot of shock. Some people are questioning what happened, which I think is healthy. But even if you go down that path, there's an uncomfortable number of humans that voted for someone who doesn't feel that other humans should have the same rights. And so, it almost doesn't matter if that number was 150 million or 170 million. I know it matters from the results perspective. I know people want to understand the finer tuned points of the different demographics and exit polls of what put him over the edge. But once it became close, and once it was not a landslide statement in the other way that type of behavior was not okay, then that sent a message to a number of communities. Is it worse for them that now we're going to see the consequences of whatever that legislation and tone is that is cooked up with the new administration? Absolutely. But it was already getting scary watching how many people were totally comfortable with the vilification of the trans community, with, his assault in the past, with the insurrection. I mean, I could go on, but I just think it's really important to understand that there are people that are genuinely afraid today and despondent because they feel not that their person wasn't put in office, but that they as people just got put in a second class role in this society. And that's really, really hard to take from a country that prides itself on being equal for all.
We say we're equal for all, but whether we're equal for all or not is that question. Sujata says on LinkedIn, while things seem insurmountable right now, the first Trump win is what made me an activist, and it's time to get to work again. Padma says on Facebook, very sad and depressed. Padma, if you've just joined us, I'm wearing my brightest possible shirt. I've put on my old man cologne to say that we have to look forward. We have to understand what happened and then move forward. I want to share with all of you a comment from my daughter, who has worked very hard on this election. And you will see here, this was the VOA did a little segment on her and a little documentary, followed her around as a active voter. And she texted something to our family this morning that I thought would be worth all of you hearing. And what she texted me was the following. She was looking at what's happening in the world, and she said that we had a fork in the road, a future that normalizes diversity, women's leadership, strong climate policy to mitigate the deadly climate crisis, and championing of human rights, or a future that normalizes sexual assault, homophobia, the gender and class wage gap, a reduction of women's rights writ large, especially health and medical, combined with anti-immigrant rhetoric and committing hate crimes while wearing the red hat. That was the choice America was offered. And more than half of Americans chose that road. Jonah, your thoughts?
The people spoke. The people spoke. Shawna, to your comments, I remember back to 2016 when all of the sexual assault, well, I don't even want to call them allegations, sexual assault incidents came out, and talking with friends and, finding that, church-going people really deep into the church weren't put off by that. They were still, he was still enough that they were ready to vote for him. And I think that was an indicator that, some of these values and things that we like to think about people having and institutions representing, at the end of the day, that's not really what it's about when it comes time to vote.
Shawna.
Yeah, there's so many thoughts that are going through my mind, and I'm trying to keep it PG if I'm being honest. So I think it's going to be really interesting that, yes, the people have spoken, but it's fair to say that we don't all live in the same America. Your income level, where in the state, where in the United States you live, what your ethnicity or whatever your marginalized category is, like all of those things change your experience. And so what I find is really interesting about all of this, and interesting is again my PG word, is that so many people who cast their ballot are not going to face the ramifications of what's about to occur. I don't want to put one human on a pedestal one way or another. So I'm not saying that the person who's about to take office is about to single-handedly do all of these things one by one. What I'm saying is there's a behavior that it is inarguable that he has encouraged and fostered over the years. And now that kind of darker thread of America, and especially in certain places, and I'm in Florida and I'm a crisis manager, I know of which I speak, that's about to be unleashed, similar to when they let the Dementors just take over at Hogwarts, right? So it's not him. I don't like to create this big shadowy mythic being. I think that doesn't help us. I think what we're really going to have to do as a country is pivot from the big idea into the very narrow, how do I keep my people and my community safe? How do I keep my self-health? I can't even say it. That's how far removed I am from the concept right now in check. And then also, what can I do with what's left in that gas tank to try to help others and start building that resistance coalition again? That is a huge shift, and we're going to get whiplash from it.
Jonathan says, how about it's a vote for racism as one of the answers. And then I see also a comment here from Kelly, who says, all your emotions are valid, but the logic of the law is misunderstood by progressives today. I voted for Hillary and understand why Trump won. One of the ways in which Trump won was because he was able to get young men to vote, your younger men to vote who typically don't vote. And he was able to activate them on a couple of levels, going on Rogan's podcast, getting his endorsement, Elon Musk's support, enormous support. All of those things made a difference. And Scott Galloway, the professor who's a very good analyst of things in society, he said that when young men heard we're not going back, they didn't necessarily all hear the we that we thought they would be thinking about. So that's a combination here. And just to say one more thing about Elon Musk, that when he bought Twitter for $44 billion, a lot of people like me said, what a waste of money. In fact, it was the best investment in history. $44 billion, he's bought a presidency, he's bought a country, and with that, he's going to affect the planet on a global scale, the impact of what he's done and what he's going to do. So that's what we're going to be paying attention to as well. Shawna, your thoughts?
Yeah, just to the Elon Musk comment, I sent my friend a text the other night, and I think it said that 10 billion views of his content had been seen over the past kind of X amount of weeks and months. So couldn't be truer said there.
Shawna?
Oh, okay. So this one I'm going to get a little personal instead of analytical, if it's okay with you, Sree. I come from a small town in Texas. I was born in Texas City, Texas. All right, painted water tower, the whole deal. And I was the first member of my family to graduate college in history. And when I got accepted into college, then my little tiny church sat me down with the pastor who at the time I revered, and the youth pastor and everyone else, and had basically a confrontation that said if I left for college that God would reject me, that I would be unequally yoked and no man would want me. I was in an abusive relationship at the time, and it was God's will, so I wasn't supposed to leave that relationship. So it's really, really hard to claw out of an environment like that and then have it catch up to you years and years later. So it's very frightening to think that idea of white Christian nationalism, for a lack of a better phrase, of women being on the planet to serve men, that is a really just a sobering thought. And if you want to know, like, candidly, what philosophy these men are buying into, that's it. Right? It's not rocket science. Like, I mean, we can do the analysis, we can do the tests, we can run the data, but the idea that you get to be kings and all of us here will serve you, that's really attractive for certain people. And that's the society that they have been very clear that they want to build by literally ripping away the rights and autonomy of so many other groups. And so I think it's just an emotional gut punch, comma, but taking the breath. That's why we're all here, is to try to figure out how do we fight it. I mean, we did fight. I think we just collectively as a country, I saw some beautiful moments, but man, did they just unleash a dragon slayer last night in me. I just gotta get a little bit of a nap, and then I'm ready to get back in.
And you'll do great. We love our dragon slayers. You are one of them. Sudha Parekh says, this is stressful and a crisis. We need psychotherapy. We had great hope that our Vice President Kamala Harris will win. We have so many comments coming in from folks, people watching around the world. Tell us how you're feeling, what you're thinking about the election. And we want to hear from all sides, and we want to understand what is happening. Jonah, I know we only have you for limited time today, so give us some more things that you're thinking through all of this, and what happens next for the Blindian Project.
Sure. I think for me, it's about this point of intersectionality, and us understanding how interconnected our lives and existing on this planet really are. That's been a kind of basis of our work to begin with. But regardless of race or where you live, whether thinking about climate or economic, our lives are intertwined. So just trying to continue to do that work, continue to bring people together, via various means, and just trying to build a better world, for everyone, for our children, for our youth.
Tell us what we can find on the Blindian-Project.com and on your social media feeds. You do so well on social.
Thank you. Yes. So the project is a coming together of Black or African descent and South Asian communities. For those who don't know, there's a rich intertwined history, but through a lot of different things, some of them colonialism, and some of the things that we probably saw in the elections here have been pitted against each other. So we look to bring communities together, use creativity, art to let people understand how our lives are interconnected.
And what can we do to support you and the work that you're doing?
Go to the website, go to the socials. We are just about to obtain not-for-profit status, so we are looking to fundraise, always looking to integrate additional people into the community, take on volunteers and people looking to assist in this line of work that we do that feels like it's been under attack for some while. But I believe it's going to become even increasingly more important as we go forward from today.
Sree, we lost your microphone. You need to.
Yeah, thank you, Jonah, for your comments. So we see a nice comment here from Andrew who says, Shawna, love your TikTok content during the elections. Tell me the role that TikTok played in this election and how it is that you've created such great content, 10 million plus views.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. That's very kind. I feel like TikTok has been a really great partner for us, and the fact that they have helped to nurture different types of content and guide us through their platform. I am not 18 years old, so it was a little bit of a learning curve for me, but the TikTok community was extremely welcoming. And what I think that we were able to create was longer form content. I got a lot of younger viewers that said, "Oh my gosh, over 5 minutes, what are you doing?" So we definitely skewed over 30 with a lot of our viewership, but it was a really great way to fill in context and color and sometimes honestly facts that people felt like they weren't getting from the legacy media outlets. And the great thing about TikTok is when you do have programming, whether it's a live or it's opening up the comment feeds in content that you're posting, then people feel like they have an outlet to ask questions, to get things wrong, to say, I don't understand, what is this? So we started out the process doing things as simple but important as explaining the electoral college to people and what that meant, because it was very confusing to first-time voters. And we got into different levels of conversation, like what are crosstabs of polls. So it was really great to see that conversation evolve over real time. I kind of wish that we were at a point where Americans didn't have to closely monitor their government and legislation in the coming years, but I think that we're going to need to do exactly that. So I'm hoping TikTok plays a continued role and letting us help educate and engage in that way.
One of the things that I know we were trying to understand is what will happen to TikTok in this. There's a process by which it could be banned in the US, and so we'll see what happens with the new government. Sudha says, Shawna, you are a healer. How beautiful is that?
That's very kind.
Yeah, and she's watching on Facebook. And Christina is watching on Facebook. Appalling that so many Americans fell for the rhetoric of someone who could be the furthest from who they are, and a party that actually polices against them is then the actual policies against them. Thank you, Christina, for sharing that. I want to bring on our next guest, Mary, who's been with us. She's just fresh from the BBC, but I know that Jonah will have to leave soon. So Jonah, if you want to give us a final thought, or if you can stay, but give us your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I just want to say, Shawna and Mary coming on now, thank you for your work. Thank you for the work you do. Sree, thank you for your work. Neil, as well too. These are important conversations, and we'll see that a bit more in the future here. But it's great to be able to have these conversations, especially after what has transpired last night. So I appreciate you.
Thank you, and we appreciate you and everything that you're doing. Everyone, please check out his site and go to Blindian-Project on social media as well. So much great content, give us so much hope for the future. Before he leaves, I want to show a picture of this amazing woman, Shamala Gopalan. I think she was someone that we were able to focus on this time in this election, and imagining her, a young girl from India, coming to the United States and having a relationship and getting married to an African American, an immigrant from Jamaica, and the woman that they raised, the women that they raised, including Maya Harris. It's been an incredible story, Jonah. I want you to reflect on that. This is the back cover of this book that uses a quote from Maya Angelou, phenomenal woman, Kamala Harris, by Chidanand Rajgata, the journalist. So this is, I will always remember this photo. Jonah, anything you'd like to say?
That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Jonah. We'll see you soon. And with that, I'd like to bring on stage Mary, who has been talking to the BBC, trying to explain America to the BBC. And she's a CQ roll call columnist and Equal Time podcast host. Please welcome Mary C. Curtis.
Good morning. What a morning. I'm trying to catch up here, but it was interesting, the international interest, obviously, in this election, but they were very curious about the issues. There were several other guests, one who was saying basically that Kamala Harris didn't make herself clear and didn't talk about the issues enough. I kind of said, well, he only had concepts of a plan in the debate of Donald Trump. She also said, talking about maybe the issue of abortion was important, but even women said the economy was more important. And somehow they didn't seem to blame Trump for the abortion restrictions. When he said, take it to the states, they thought about that, because as we saw last night, also, many of the states with abortion on the ballot, of course, abortion rights, it approved it. Now, it failed in Florida, but that's only because it requires 60%, and it got 57%. And the one thing I'm curious, digging deep into these issues, in deep red Missouri, they approved reproductive rights. They raised the minimum wage and approved paid leave. And even though they voted yet for Josh Hawley, the Republican, and Trump overwhelmingly, and so they like Democratic policies, but they don't associate those Democrats with the policies, and they vote overwhelmingly for Republicans. Which is that the messaging isn't good? Is that the Democratic brand is so toxic on cultural issues that they've driven that wedge between those two connections? I think that's very fascinating.
Shawna, your thoughts?
So my first thought is rights for me and not for thee, right? So it's really great that, certain states now can get reproductive care. I'm in Florida where we absolutely cannot. And that has personally impacted me and our family to where I have to leave the state to get care that I need. And so I think what we saw, it is, to Mary's point, going to be extremely fascinating, but I'm prepared for it also to be a little bit discouraging, because I think what we saw is people that realized, oh wait, I can have my cake and eat it too. I can vote to preserve my own rights in this state, not worry about everybody else, and get the tax cuts and the white supremacy that I love. And I just feel that is what happened. I think that we talk about voters voting in their own self-interest, and unfortunately we underestimated exactly what that means. So that's where we're seeing those split votes. And another thing that, Mary is saying that I think is just really fascinating, aside from the split votes, is what we're going to see in the future from these coalitions that were built. Because I think, we're treating this like it's a normal election, partially because we don't know of another way to do it. These are uncharted waters. And also I think we're in a little bit of shock. But he has pledged revenge on his enemies. He has pledged a government like no other. He's pledged to silence news outlets. So was all of that just rhetoric that was red meat for his base, or do certain people need to be afraid right now? And as someone who literally is having team meetings today to figure out how to get a trans member of our staff out of the state safely, we don't get the luxury of waiting to find out. The base is frothy, and so the impact of this is going to be felt even before he's sworn in.
I want to follow up on that too. When Shawna was talking about coalitions. You're going to hear a lot less about BIPOC and different coalitions across minority groups. We're all in this together because you can see from the numbers that Latino men voted for Trump overwhelmingly. And you see other minority groups, as I think Randall, our guest yesterday, was talking about, even Indian Americans becoming more conservative. So in a sense, I think that is also, I think I've read that pollsters, when they talk to Latinos about this, it's almost as though when he talks about the criminals coming over the border, and he's not talking about me. I will be special. And I think that's something interesting to look at. If he indeed follows up on plans to have detention camps and to make push out all undocumented immigrants from the United States, not only will it have a big effect on everyone's economy, but there are so many mixed status families in this country. I think there might be some people who think he's not talking about me, that will be quite surprised if they really carry out these big sweeps. They're not going to say, "Are you a Latino who voted for Trump?" when they ask to see your papers. And the same thing as if you were an African American who, when he's talking about Haitians, "That's not me." That's pretty much all Black folks. When he talks about police having complete immunity and having a day of violence, he jokes, to clean up crime. If they're sweeping through your neighborhood, they're not going to say, "Hey, dude, did you vote for Trump?" Your head's going to get blocked too. They didn't ask my son, "Are you a student at Yale?" which he was, when he was profiled and stopped in our own neighborhood and had to go to court about it, just because he was in a nice car in a nice neighborhood that is predominantly white. So I do think a lot of Black folks this morning, and I'm seeing it in social media, are saying, "So I guess we don't have allies." And it's to that point that Shawna was saying, this won't be me. He's not talking about me. And that's very dangerous, because we see with the history of people who are ruling an authoritarian way, he may love you in the morning, but if you cross him in the afternoon, you might be on that list. So it's because Black folks did vote overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris. If you look at even Black men, if you look at that at the list and at the results of it, and they're looking around, white women did come back and vote, as they have in the last two elections, for Trump, despite reproductive rights, despite women of all races having problems getting reproductive health care, and even in some cases dying. It's a lot to take in this morning.
Yeah, we're seeing this comment from Chuck, which I think reflects a lot of people. I hear younger voices. I hear frustration with the status quo, though usually with a left-leaning bent. They're angry at the deadlock and lack of progress. But I did read an op-ed in the New York Times this morning saying that election is actually a rejection of traditional American leadership, which is like this is why voices like Cheney, Milley, Mathis didn't help Harris. Those folks who might have been some folks that people would have listened to, it didn't really matter. Folks, you are watching our special election coverage. Let's remind you of our guests. We have been covering the show for so many hours. We've been live over the last 3 days, and I have found it helpful to me to understand what's happening. We've been live on the channels of Scroll and the channels of Indian Express, and today we are continuing our coverage. You can see our WhatsApp alerts QR code, which will tell you about how we're going to be covering this going forward. This is not the end of our election coverage, our political coverage, because we need to be paying more attention, not less, as we go forward. And our guests today are Mary C. Curtis, as well as Shawna Vercher, the political fixer. We're so glad to have both of them with us. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us how you're feeling. We'd love to show your comments. We're looking for insights, looking for ideas. We're trying to understand what has happened. And it's one of the questions I got is, why is it that Kamala Harris hasn't spoken yet? So we're going to welcome our guests and just ask them about that. Donald Trump, of course, spoke very early. We were worried that he would just declare victory, but this time when he came on, he was already victorious. Any thoughts on why she hasn't spoken yet, Shawna?
Yeah, she's a fact-driven, measured woman. She's a disciplined woman. We saw that in the campaign, and I think that right now they're dotting the I's and crossing the T's, looking to make sure that they feel confident with the results, if I had to imagine. And I think they're looking at what do they want their closing message to be to the American people, making sure that they toe the line with not pretending like what just happened is okay, but at the same time not leaving them despondent. So I think that's a tough road to climb. I am starting to see some, just really quickly, I'm starting to see some chatter like, oh, the Democrats should have done this or she should have done that. And I'll just push back on a couple of things. First of all, I've been in this business for an unhealthy amount of years, and she ran a nearly flawless campaign. She wasn't speaking to you all of the time. She tried to reach out and broaden the coalition. No missteps really to speak of, building the broadest coalition we have ever seen in modern historical politics when you look at independents and moderates and Republicans coming together. But as someone who messages for a living, then I just got to be really, really blunt here and say, if I'm sitting down here and I'm saying that he is a convicted felon with 34 felonies, he is someone that has tried to subvert actively and overthrow our government, and you're trying to put him in charge of the government, and he has been found liable for rape, and you're like, yeah, but tell me more. How do you message that? And I think that's what some of us are struggling with. I love the hope and the change and the beautiful nation messaging that she focused on, but for some of us in the advocacy community, it's really hard to listen to some people on the chat boards and whatever say, yeah, I hear all that, but what's in it for me? That's not what we thought this country was. So I think, to Mary's point, a lot to take in today.
And also, as to follow up, Shawna, he's proven that many things don't matter. Debates don't matter. She obviously, even conservatives said she won that debate. She had policy. He had concepts of a plan for healthcare. So debates don't matter. She had a superior ground game. That didn't matter. You can nitpick all you want. But the bottom line is Trump, people in America, a majority of them liked what Trump was selling. That's it. And his closing message was so dark. It was retribution. It was calling her incredible personal insults. And J.D. Vance calling her trash. People at Trump's rallies making these crude comments that I can't even repeat here, and him nodding and laughing along. I mean, you can nitpick her all you want in this campaign she did in a little over 100 days, but look at what he did. And people said, you know what? I want another slice of that. And one other thing I think is pretty important. Nobody today is talking, since he won, about what is going to happen next, about her supporters rioting on the Capitol or denying the truth. Whereas if she had won, I think all of us here can agree that people were warning on Telegram, the Proud Boys, we're going to take our government, we're not going to let this happen, and not another steal. So let that sink in, America, that one person, you were confident that win or lose, they're going to accept the democratic order, and the other one would only be satisfied if he won. Don't just gloss over that lightly. So we trust that one person was going to be true to American ideals and democracy, but we wanted to vote for the other person who was throwing out the fear, the anger, and by the end of his campaign wasn't really making any sense. I mean, he took to the stage talking about Arnold Palmer's genitals and Hannibal Lecter and swaying to the music. As Shawna said, don't say that somehow it would have been fine if only she had done.
It almost didn't matter anything that she had done. People were looking for this, more of this, and that's the shocking part. Ruchira is watching and wants to understand the impact on the world. Dr. Tachi, who has been on air relentlessly and splendidly on her Instagram, is watching. Thank you for watching from Florida. Emily is watching from Chicago. I was extremely disappointed with the election results. I want to understand who did not and did vote and why. I know the data won't be available till later, but that if we look back, we're saying that the elections are very much like 2016, more than like 2020, and tens of millions of people stayed home, and the people who did come out did have this enormous impact. I wrote some notes that I shared with my family, and I want to just read these out, and then I would love our team to just give us feedback. I'm just going to go through them very quickly. Misogyny and racism played roles. There will not be a female Democratic nominee for president for many cycles. Joe Rogan and Musk are factors in young men voting. Typically, they don't vote. They're celebrities of a different kind, as powerful as Beyonce, Taylor Swift. Women's rights to healthcare will be decimated. It already is. A 7-2 majority in the Supreme Court, along with Thomas and Alito being replaced by 40-year-olds. There's going to be unfettered control of cabinet appointments. Get ready for Health Secretary RFK Jr. I can't even say it. Banning of vaccines, return of measles, polio, all of that could happen. Grave damage to the planet and the climate emergency. We're going to see Netanyahu unleashed. Gaza will continue to be pounded, and so will Lebanon. Putin unleashed. Ukraine will lose land permanently. Withdrawal of NATO is in the cards. Tariffs on China will raise prices on everything. I saw a joke that someone posted. You wanted the economy fixed, so you elected somebody who was bankrupted, who was declared bankruptcy 6 times. These are close battles in the States, but can only be seen as a major win, a mandate, and almost a landslide for Trump. And Vance, J.D. Vance, is a deeply flawed man. He will inevitably be the standard bearer of the party. I know that's a depressing set of observations, but I'd like to hear from each of you. Pick any of those and respond, please. Shawna.
Woo, Sree, it's too early to start drinking. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess this is the takeaway. We don't know what's going to happen. I think we are people that looked for big ideals, and we looked for this to be a big turning point in history for so many reasons. The first woman, a woman of color, both Black and of Indian descent, right? Progressive policies, women not being afraid to say certain words like abortion. I mean, so many things we were looking for, and just big, big, big. And what I think we're ultimately going to see is a closure of communities. And what I mean by that is people are going to have to find their people again. We were getting bold and thinking like, okay, this is it. We've unified. Everybody's coming together. To Mary's earlier point, we thought we had this broad, are we on the same page coalition? We clearly did not. And so now, if someone looks at me, I saw this post on, I think, Instagram, they're instantly going to be thinking, is she a good witch or a bad witch? Right? So what am I going to do to send that signal that it's a safe space for someone who's LGBTQ, someone who's Black, someone who's trans? We're going to have to find our people again and then figure out and organize in a new way, because to Mary's point, the campaigning did not matter at all. I just want to be very clear. She ran a flawless campaign, but he did no campaigning. He didn't sell out his stadiums. He had no ground game. The list goes on and on. The campaigning didn't matter. So how do we organize, and what is our next step? I don't think we have the answers to that yet, but that's healing, self-care, recovery, finding our safe spaces with each other, and then what the heck is the new battle plan?
Oh, well, well, first of all, I'm going to have to get switch one of my yoga classes, because one of my favorite teachers is a very conservative white evangelical who feels that Trump's election is God's will, and I won't be able to take that. But the
Not
twisting,
relaxing, Mary.
the twisting of religion bothers me as a person of faith, because, and I've repeated this, and I have interviewed the Reverend Barber and many people involved. He showcased some folks in the Poor People's Campaign, actual poor working class, poor people who are working but not making it at all. And, at all of these religious fervor events for Trump, you hear about power, white Christianity ascendant. You don't hear about the poor. You don't hear about poverty. And this has me looking at a lot of people who are barely making it. I personally, I guess, my spirit, I might have some problems with, but I'll be fine in some ways. But there's so many people, including people like folks I grew up with, who won't be in one of those states that raises the minimum wage. And we know it won't be a national one, because Republicans in control of the Senate won't let that happen. All of the people who will be live in food deserts and have problems. In Project 2025, they want to eliminate these programs that give lunches to children who get free and reduced lunch during the school year, to give them lunches and food in the summertime, because that makes them too dependent on the government. I'm aching about all of this, about people who will be caught. I mean, people will get familiar with what an iron lung looks like. I just already read a piece this morning in Idaho. They're restricting in some places getting a COVID vaccine because of this vaccine denialism that has taken hold. And the people it will fall on in the most, even when you talk, Sree, about Netanyahu and Gaza, already look at the Gazans who are suffering so much, who they're bringing back vaccination programs because children were starting to get polio again, who don't have enough food, and what effect that will have on them. I guess as someone, I grew up working class, but my neighborhood was such that there were people on welfare and people barely scraping by. And that's who my thought turns to now, where we're going to have policies influenced by Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, two immigrants from apartheid era South Africa, who are crowing with their power and what they're going to do, and their government contracts they're probably going to get. I read your list. That's what I thought of. In every case, they're going to be people who suffer greatly, both here and internationally. And that will be a problem. Look at all the places in the United States. Where is Cancer Alley, where companies are allowed to dump in places where poor Black and brown people live? I mean, the Flint, Michigan water crisis, we're going to see that again in communities like Flint. Honestly, it's hard to talk about, and as I said, as a woman of color, and I get these emails and this and that, but there are people who are really going to be suffering in very real ways.
Shawna, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's just trying to brace for the impending storm. To use analogy, someone who's in the Gulf Coast that just has to brace for big storms regularly. It is hard to do knowing what's about to hit. It is a very slow moving storm. And I grew up in one of those communities that Mary mentioned. It's, what they call a majority minority community, largely Black, some Mexican. Me, the Creek Cherokee kid who passes for white, right? So poor refineries that were allowed to dump, health conditions that people didn't understand. My family doctor literally took chickens as payment while I was growing up. Just no access to healthcare. And the thing is, when we're talking about these oligarchs that are clamping down on media, to Mary's point, these are unseen parts of the country. These are places we don't like to look, the Black Belt of Alabama, places that don't have running water or electricity, right? And so are they going to get further buried? And I guess that the answer to that lies in communication like this, not if we can muster the strength and support each other enough to shine a light on this and try to help lift those people up. It is a heavy, heavy lift, and it's going to be very, very difficult. But I am thankful to be connected to people like you all, that we at least don't feel like we're alone.
Thank you for that. That's the only thing keeping me going this morning, to tell you the truth, and it's the knowing what so many of my fellow citizens think of me and people like me. And, there was a candidate in one of the Western states, and his opponent was Native American woman. And during the debate, he said, "Go back to where you came from," and you could laugh, but now that we are also taking true history out of the schools, these folks who were ascendant will think that somehow they are deserving, that America is a Christian country, that they built it without sin and without aid, not the genocide of Native Americans and the enslavement of African Americans and so much else, the internment of Japanese Americans. That's, that is the kicker of that. We didn't grow up with much, but when I was 3 years old, my mother got me a library card. Libraries are free, and education is something that folks in my family grabbed a hold of. But now Project 2025 punishes librarians with fines and sometimes jail for opening kids' minds. Just think of that.
Yep. Folks, we have just a couple of minutes left. What I want to do is to give our guests a moment to think of their final words for us at this time, and we'll come back to them to hear from each of them to share their thoughts. I wanted to end by looking at a couple of things and show you a couple of things. One is this cover from the New Yorker, which came out just last month. I'm also thinking of a cover from The Economist that said, "Can she win?" And we know the answer now is that she wasn't going to win with this current climate of where we are. But I really want to focus on this book, Kamala Raised Her Hand by Rakhi Mirchandani and art by Supriya Kelkar. This book came out. It is a book about how when someone was getting bullied, when she saw injustice in her community, when her country needed her, Kamala raised her hand. And it's just such a beautiful book that I've been telling everyone with young kids they need to share this with them, boys and girls. And it talks about what it's like to be a young person of color. And I think about the young people of color today, what they are thinking, where they're going to go, and the importance of speaking up, speaking out. So it matters. And we want to think about, we tell a lot of people step up, and she stepped up. And she ran for office when it couldn't have been easy, and it wasn't easy. All the offices she ran for. And when Joe Biden picked her to be his vice presidential nominee, and they won, it was important for me to share this because I know that this is a time where she will get blamed. She will be microanalyzed about how she ran this campaign. But as we've heard from Shawna and from Mary, that the campaign was not the problem. America is the problem. America deserves the chaos it's going to get, but most Americans do not deserve that chaos. And that's what we're going to see, unfortunately, in the next few months and years. I want to say to everyone that I hope I'm wrong. Prove us wrong, Trump, Trumpists, Vance, and Vance's people. Prove us wrong. We would be thrilled to see America in a better place. We'd love to see the world in a better place. Fewer wars. Make that happen and show that you care about the entire country, not just the half that voted for you. And remember that this isn't some tiny minority that lost this election, right? We're talking about 70, 80 million people who voted, who care about certain issues. They have to count as well. Thank you for listening to that. And remember to get this book, Kamala Raised Her Hand by Rakhi Mirchandani, art by Supriya Kelkar. And we want to tell you that we have an upcoming show, the Sunday New York Times Read Along will be back 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Every Sunday, we read the newspaper out loud, whether it's the New York Times or another paper, because we believe in facts and we want you to join us. Please let us know if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode. We're also going to figure out how we're going to cover this administration, hold its feet to the fire. That's what we do. And with that, I'd like to bring back our very special guests, Mary C. Curtis, and there is Shawna Vercher. Both of them are dear friends whose presence here today has been healing for me. And I'm so grateful at the toughest time for them to come on and speak so eloquently, so beautifully, so necessarily, and to communicate that so well is a blessing. So I'm going to ask each of you to give me your thoughts, and we're going to start with Shawna, who is the political fixer, and she's going to tell us what she's thinking, some thoughts for the future, and also how we can find, follow, and listen to Shawna. Thank you.
So first of all, a sincere thank you, Sree and Neil and the Digimentors family. this, for you to trust us to be a part of this really important conversation at this particularly volatile moment in our history. I know Mary feels the same way. Just thank you so much. I also want to thank people like Scroll In for making sure that this content is heard and that these conversations continue. That is going to be increasingly important in the days ahead. Right now, my message to everyone else is this. There is a feeling that what we're about to see is them lighting it all on fire. And what I'll tell you is you don't have to give that fire oxygen. And what I mean by that is practicing some deep self-care, turning off toxic news channels that raise your blood pressure, that doesn't make you less American or less educated. Find other ways that are less harmful to get your information where you feel like you are in touch with what's going on, but you're not being emotionally manipulated. I also feel like it's really, really important to not look away. So, you know, when you're going through a depression, they always say, listen to your gut. I'm someone who suffers from PTS and chronic depression, and that is true most of the time. But when I'm having a flare up and I'm not feeling very confident, then my gut is telling me hide and put the covers over my head. And this was a big disappointment. So definitely take a beat and heal. And whether or not this country and this government are salvageable, I'm not a historian. I'm not going to even speak to that. But I do believe that there are people that are worth saving and connecting with. And there are still those pockets of joy. That joy didn't disappear just because of last night. So take your beat, reconnect, re-engage in a way that you can feel healthy and confident, and try to help where you can, because there are countless people, unfortunately, that I think are going to need our help in whatever way that is. Reassurance, resources, connecting them to people in a community as a safe space. So I just am really, really hoping that this is the start of a family conversation, not an end to it.
So beautifully put. Thank you very much, Shawna. Everyone, please check out The Political Fixer. Follow her on TikTok and all the channels. And we thank you for your time, your energy, your thoughtfulness. Thank you very much. Mary C. Curtis, you have been amazing with me every single moment for the last 3 days as we try to understand what's happening. And I turn the floor to you. Before that, I want to just show you some of the comments. Emily Suter says, thank you for mentioning the Poor People's Campaign. Sudha says, this is a therapeutic group. Thank you all. The campaign was flawless, says Dr. Tachi. Apollo is watching from Philadelphia. You're not wrong, unfortunately, Dr. Tachi says. Thank you, ladies. And Sujata says, thank you for this, Sree. And thank you for all for sharing your time with us. And Jonathan says, great show, wonderful questions and moderation. Apollo says, sounds like we're in a world of hurt. Mary, over to you.
Well, I wanted to be optimistic as well, as Shawna did, and thank you for acknowledging this space, both for the folks in this studio, on this chat, and watching out there. I feel like I know you, you're my best friend, Dr. Tachi. I would say, look to the activists. You know, I had 3 elder siblings in the civil rights movement, so even when I was a toddler, I was enmeshed in this family of people who saw possibilities, things that weren't there, and imagined they could be there. I'm sure when John Lewis was in his 20s and walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge getting beaten in the head for voting rights, he could not imagine that he would be a congressman still fighting for voting rights, because it is all cyclical, as my historian son tells me. But I would say, look to the activists, look to the people who are holding it down. Folks like Congressman Jim Clyburn, whom I know a bit, who is still there in the House, fighting the good fight next to people, I'm sure, next to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. It must be very difficult. Think of Kamala Harris, who did step up, who will be scrutinized, who was insulted in every possible way, personal, political, everything, intellectual, this cycle, and stayed strong. I am really sending a lot of warmth to her. It must be so difficult, but she will survive because she has survived so much. And folks like, when someone mentioned the Poor People's Campaign, I do see William Barber, the Reverend William Barber, as an inspiration. I've interviewed him. He has a crippling illness where he's in pain all the time and he can hardly stand. He actually has to lean against something. And yet he is out there with poor people, low wealth people, doing the work, listening to them, fighting for them. He once told me, you know, when I go into a wood or outdoors and talking to people, those homeless folks try to make me comfortable and put me in a beautiful place, a spot where I will be comfortable. And then he said, when I was arrested in the Raleigh State House for advocating for voting rights, those police roughed me up, put me in handcuffs. The powerful use that power. The poor are just trying to help and get along. So look to the activists. They will be working this whole time to alleviate the suffering of all the people that we've talked about will suffer. Help in any way you can. And they will give you hope and something to do to make this world better. I too hope that Trump sees that there are a lot of people who didn't vote for him. But when I look at the people surrounding him, like Stephen Miller and Elon Musk and RFK Jr., it's tough. That's why I'm looking toward the people who are doing positive things in your community. There's always folks doing things in your church, in your school, all of these places, and that will get us out of this and have your voice be heard. But I will admit it's tough right now. So if you have to feel a little depressed and indulge yourself in some self-care and things you need to do, please do that as well, because we need all of you to survive and be out there.
Thank you to both of you. Andrew Lee says there's a very therapeutic conversation coming so quickly off the shock of the results. Thanks to all of you. I have on my screen here the great Representative John Lewis, who told us to make good trouble. He also said that we came here on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. And that, I think, is a way to think about what happens and where we go from here. Thank you to both of you and to everyone who has watched. And a special shout out to Neil Parekh, who has worked tirelessly to put us on the air for 8 hours plus. I think it's a total of 10 hours of live coverage these last 3 days. It's been an honor and a pleasure to work with Neil, and to everyone who has been part of this. Our gratitude to Scroll, to Indian Express. These are platforms with millions of audience members, and we are very grateful to all of you for being with us. Becky says thank you, and Dr. Tachi says yes. With that, let's say goodbye and onward, and God bless America. Thanks very much, everybody.